This is the Outliers Edge podcast, where we champion the leaders who are shaping the next era of humanity by taking them to the edge of their comfort zone so that they can lead us to the edge of what's next. I'm your host, Nyama Ashong. Let's do this. Hello there. Nyama Ashong here, founder of Outliers Edge, where we champion the leaders who are shaping the next era of humanity. Today, we get a chance to play with Jennifer Tsang, who is an amazing leader. I had the privilege and honor of being on her podcast, In the Lead podcast, which I definitely recommend you go and check out, where we spend some time talking about self-leadership and beyond. And I know Jennifer has had just a storied life experience here. And so I'm really, really excited to both explore a bit of that story so far, but also just see what is the story that you're writing now, so we can spend some time really supporting you in an area that would honestly accelerate the impact that you make as a leader, both externally and most importantly for you internally through your own self-leadership. So Jennifer, it's absolutely, I feel great being in conversation with you. Thank you for being someone that brings up this energy within me.
Thank you. And as we were saying before the podcast, I'm glad I got to talk to you 2 days in a row. Feels like a real treat this week, but thank you. And I appreciate the work you're doing in the world as well.
Well, let me take that in. Thanks for that. It means a lot coming from me. I see what you're doing. I see where you are. There's some real challenges that leaders are facing right now, both in their capacity as a leader and then also as the person who is one who leads, and so I'm really excited to just be in this space with you here. And I want to put out something that feels real for me right now, which is a recent take that I've taken when it comes to some of the work that I've done, where as much as this is a podcast, this is also going to be a resource for a community of people who are looking to find out how they can leverage who they are to make their biggest impact in the world and do it in a way that also keeps them financially free and financially stable, right? Mm-hmm. I think that it's that juxtaposition often comes into place. And for those who will listen to our conversation in the Lead podcast, they'll hear us talk about some of the costs that we navigate as we choose to play this kind of a game. So in the space of this being the resource, I think I need to own that for myself. I love this here. I would love to co-create this space with you really quickly, and then we'll get into some of the other questions. All right.
Let's do it.
All right. So the first thing here, Jennifer, this one here is around me and how I want to show up with you. I'm going to hide nothing and hold nothing back throughout this conversation. Are you good with that?
Yes.
All right. Awesome. I'm also here to serve rather than please. Are you good with that?
Absolutely. 100%.
All right. Thanks for taking the time to think about that. There's been one time only where I accidentally said I'm here to please rather than serve. And it's because I was so nervous. I think it was actually true in that moment, but no, I am. And the thing for me, the third thing is that I have a track record of having life-changing conversations. And at this point in my life, it's when you know that life-changing can be on the table, it's really hard to go for anything less than that. So are you open to this conversation, regardless of how it takes shape? Are you open to this being a life-changing conversation?
Yeah, let's do it. I love life-changing conversations.
Awesome. The last thing I think I need for today as we're playing is there's a space I'm trying to get to. Okay. So I think it's Outliers Edge, right? And I think I want to do here is just is be in agreement with you, make a commitment for me being on my edge, not just on the edge of what makes me comfortable, but the edge of new ideas, the frontiers that are coming out, to be in a space where we can allow things to emerge and not necessarily know what the answers are, but to go right up to our limits, our boundaries. Maybe it's in the way that we share our successes in life or our greatest aspirations and more. But I would love to be in this conversation where here's my commitment to you. I'm going to show up here and play out on my edge, whatever that happens to be. And if I have the choice to play it safe, play it for a potential audience, whoever that may be, and I step out of this moment with you to be on my edge, I'm going to choose the option that brings me closer and closer to that edge. Are you good with me playing in that way with you today?
Absolutely. Let's do it. You're speaking my language.
All right, cool, 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 cool. So let's do this here. We're gonna have the life changing conversation on the table. Let me ask you. I want to make sure I really see you, Jennifer. Like, what do you stand for in the world?
What do I stand for in the world? I stand for peace. And what I mean by that is beyond the cliches, beyond maybe the conventional ways of thinking about it, but how can each one of us cultivate that peace in our own lives and inside of us? That is something that I strive for and that I own and that I work towards every day, and something that I want to stand for. For instance, somebody attacks you, right? Might have something, something to say that might trigger you, might be wanting to get a reaction out of you. How can I show up in that moment in a way that is peaceful, that is in alignment with who I want to be? So I am constantly owning and trying to cultivate that peace in my own life. So that's something that I stand for and that I'm trying to work on every day.
Yeah, that's curious to me. I'm really excited to find out more about it. I'd love to hear more about like your journey to peace and to if that's something you stand for. I'm almost imagining like the different instances that this might have shown up in your life in the past to lead you to this place. So I'll ask this here, like, because I do want to get to know you more. I like I'm going to ask it from this standpoint here. I'm curious about your story, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when I say what's your story, oftentimes people will come and be like, I don't know, what do you want? Like from the very beginning, you want to know how my parents met, all this stuff. I'm like, maybe every story starts somewhere, and every story starts in the middle, right?
Yeah.
Like there's no story that isn't in the context of life in the middle. So, would you share with me just a bit of your story as it feels like it's as this with you being a storyteller today? I might bring in some questions and ask some things that I'm continually curious about, but I'd love to hear a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So my story is a winding journey that I have been on for many, many years. But to bring it into context, you and I spoke yesterday about owning yourself and owning everything, just owning 100% of it. I was raised in a biracial family and I look Caucasian. And for me, that caused a lot of tension and anxiety growing up because I had a whole side of my family that I looked nothing like. And why that's important is that's a common thread for me throughout most of my journey, and why there was such a strong desire to want to cultivate that peace, because it all started back through childhood where, I'm a bit of a person who goes out on the edges, kind of like what you're speaking about. My entire life, I've always lived on the edges, pushing the boundaries. Probably was not the easiest child in the world. Not seeing myself reflected around me the way that others might. And that was something that was really, really hard for me for many, many years. And it's only through my journey in therapy and personal development that I've become to really come into that feeling of being different in that way. And that has been, like I said, a huge driver for me in my life. I live in the Bay Area and I've been working in high tech for over 20 years. And about 3 or 4 years ago, I felt like I had just hit a wall and I just felt stuck and I felt like I couldn't get anywhere. I couldn't, I just felt like I was stuck in this muddy quicksand that almost felt like it was swallowing me alive, because I felt like I wasn't being true to who I was and wasn't really owning myself. Now, to take a step back, I started down a personal development journey about 16 years ago in therapy. I had some pretty profound losses in my life, and it drove me to this place of, wanting to seek support and to seek just deeper meaning. I had this really deep drive of, I want to understand like where this is coming from and why this is coming up in this way for me. So I had started down that journey, have been in therapy for over 16 years, been a great support system for me. I've been able to really get out on those edges. And I think for the first time, feel comfortable out there, and not because I was ever uncomfortable, but I feel like the perceptions of being out on that edge really added to that anxiety that I had, and that self-doubt and that self-perception I had of myself, where it's really helped me come into that feeling of being able to own yourself completely. So going through therapy, having a job, and just feeling stuck brought me to this place of what I also, another thing that I own a lot in my life is the surrendering. I had to really surrender to what I thought was my life journey, what I was really trying to make happen. And by surrendering to that and really taking a step back and kind of allowing and giving permission for life to take me, set me off on a whole new like trajectory in my career and in my personal life. So I made a really big pivot a few years back in deciding to become a certified coach, really rotating into this position that felt like it was aligned to me. Now, where I was being held back in the past was from that anxiety. I just felt like there's always been these undercurrents of anxiety that I've had to kind of work with, embrace, kind of integrate. We talked a lot about integration yesterday on my podcast, as well as find ways to integrate that into my life. So for me, that's where, like, when you say, what do you stand for? It's really that piece, because I've seen my own journey over the years and how I've caused myself in some way so much suffering that in order to live more fully for me, it means living in that peace. So I think there's a lot of different components, just it all kind of started to come together, but all these little fragmented pieces over my life at the time, I didn't really have the awareness or even the language or context to understand maybe what was happening until I really started to lean into that piece that I wanted to develop for myself. So yeah, I mean, I don't know if that answers your question, but that's kind of my journey in a nutshell. So now, I'm a coach. I, have a corporate role, but I'm able to, again, be more aligned to my purpose, my value, my intrinsic kind of purpose, if that makes sense, to be my full self. So I feel like at this point in my life, I'm able to be my full self more than I ever have. And I think a lot of that is attributed to the personal development work and really getting more comfortable out there on those edges, and cultivating that peace.
Well, thanks for that, Jennifer. Because like as I'm hearing this, there's different. The thought of like pieces of peace came to me. It's like throughout your life, you've had different pieces of peace come to you, and since that's so like important to you, I would love to explore that further, because it feels like, and let me know if this is correct, but it feels like part of your journey to really owning yourself has been through the journey of owning peace and finding peace, and allowing for peace more in your world. Don't let me put words in your mouth here. Like, is that actually in alignment there?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So let's go back a bit here. Let's go back to, let's start off like you like growing up, you grew up in a family, you were biracial, but you look Caucasian, and you said like that was one of the things that helped you like decide that you wanted like to just like start searching for peace. Can you like paint a little bit of picture for me to like see like what was peacemaking at that time for you, and kind of like how did that live? I don't even know, it might have been a less mature way of finding peace now, but I'm really curious about like about what peacemaking was for you at that point, or finding peace.
As I'm reflecting back on it, I don't know if I had really the skills or even the awareness at that point in my life to understand. It's funny. I don't even know if kids really see differences, but you can sense it. And for me, the process started to become really trusting that sense and trusting that it was going to be okay. So for me, it was a lot of like developing self-reflection practices and just kind of digging a little bit deeper with some of the feelings and emotions that I was having. That was the very beginning. Now, was I great at it? I wouldn't say so. But I think the biggest turning point came to me when I was probably in my mid 20s, was when I think it really started to all solidify for me from that standpoint, as I made a determination at that point that I needed to find more peace in my life, whatever that meant. Because I don't feel like before that point I had done, you know, as great of a job, because I had so much anxiety that I felt like I was constantly trying to run from myself. And I don't know if I had, again, the language or the experience to understand why, or what was I running from, or how to kind of really get a grasp on that. So for me, it was a lot about little moments of finding peace. I also played a lot of sports, that in a lot of ways was a peaceful situation for me, because you could become focused and put your energy and attention into something else that gave you a lot of satisfaction, or gave you, that drive or whatever. It gave you some other feeling. So you weren't necessarily hyper focused on what was happening maybe in other aspects of your life. So I feel like I had tried to search for ways to maybe push away, if that makes sense, some of the things that I was going through or feeling, where when I started down the journey in therapy, it really forced me to kind of sit with it and face it. And that was an experience that is just, it's changed my life so profoundly, because when I'm talking about peace, it's about removing that element of suffering, of wanting to run away from something. And I just remember that around that time, around my mid 20s, was really when it started to really come together, where before, again, it was just like little pieces maybe of it. And I didn't have a lot of peace in my life. I think that was what was driving my anxiety. So much so that I ended up in the emergency room a few times, because I literally thought I was dying or something awful was happening to me. So I needed the support. And yeah, since I live on the edges, I had no problem with just taking that leap and going, okay, let's go for it. Let's see what therapy has to offer me. So yeah, I would say it showed up kind of sporadically in pieces throughout, especially my childhood and my younger years.
As my curiosity grows here, like, so when you're saying this, there's a couple different things that'll like come to mind. One of them is just the thought for me when I was growing up. I was first generation from Ghana, West Africa. I remember my parents sat me down once and they said, like, you see the kids on TV and you see the kids on the street, like, you're not like them. They may look like you, but you're not like them, because they're American. They're Black American. Their history is very different than your history. Like, their history was stolen from them. You can actually go and trace all that back. And I remember being in a place of being in this like not knowing elements. And it's cool when you were talking about like going on the journey and finding peace in different pieces, and kind of how you navigated that throughout the years. There was an element of mine, like, I didn't have the language of belonging at the time. But I did know, because I was sat down and told, like, you don't fit in. That was the story that I heard. And for me, that showed up as like what I call fitting out for years. I was like, I think that's why I'm such an outlier now. It's like, I just feel more comfortable fitting out, and that was my immature way of finding belonging. I was like, well, you need me because I'm the only one that's like this. I'll be the class clown. I'll go like anything that needs to, like, if they say it couldn't be done, like, or no one would do it, it's like, oh wait, what's Nyama out there doing? And as you're talking about this, it just like, it takes me to part of that journey here to get to the place of saying, okay, hold on, what's the support that I need? What's the support that I need? When you talk about like having to actually face it, with going into therapy, and being the word, like for me, the word is confronted, with your past, with your experiences, and reconciling all of that, and bring that into integration. I'm feeling that.
I can remember a really powerful story in my therapy journey. There was, and it must have been a couple of years in. Sometimes my therapist and I like to joke, say sometimes I'm a little slow to catch on to things, or I like to deeply process things. So maybe I don't move through them as quickly as maybe some others. But there was this one profound moment. It was one of the biggest insights I've ever had in my life, where I remember we were sitting in her office. We were talking about something that was just very upsetting to me and it was triggering my anxiety. And I can remember that there was a voice in my head telling me, you need to leave now or you're going to die. Like, you have to leave. You tell her that I don't know, you have an emergency. You need to go. You need to get out of here. There was a sense of real urgency. And it's weird when you stop to think and go, wow, I'm hearing this in my head as if it's separate from me. It was a surreal experience. So I'm actually talking to her while I'm also paying attention to this like voice in my head where it's telling me, you need to leave now, because it had a sense of like, there's danger here. And I remember telling myself, you have nowhere to go. Like, you can't run from yourself. Even if we were to leave this situation right now, that piece of you is still going to be there. It's not going anywhere. And that was profound to me, because I had spent my entire life trying to run from that voice in my head that was telling me I'm always in danger, or I'm always need to be on guard. I always need to react. I need to get out of the situation. If nobody suffered from panic disorder before, it can be maybe difficult to understand that the level of dread that you feel in your body is similar to feeling like you are going to die. And it's not logical, right? You tell somebody and they're like, what does that mean? Like, you're fine. Like, I went to the emergency room. You're fine. There's nothing wrong with you. It's a mental thing. And I'm like, oh, okay, great. I'm crazy. So, I think it's having that moment of really stopping and kind of seeing everything play out and see how we tell ourselves a lot of stories. And for me, the question always is, do I buy into that story? Is that wounded part of me, does it have my best interest at heart? Or is it reacting based on something that it's feeling, or it's touching a trigger or a trauma of mine but that power of really stopping and just sitting with it. And I told myself, look, I'm going to sit here. And if I die, I die. Like, that's it. Like, it's over. Oh, well, I mean, what am I going to do? Like, I have nowhere else to go. I have to sit here and really face this. And that is something that I struggle with actually quite a bit, where I feel that feeling coming up, and it's about really forcing myself to sit with it. And the power becomes realizing that it is kind of a fleeting moment. A lot of things in life ebb and flow. It's not something that's there, but recognizing it and really owning it is a really powerful thing, because once you own it, it doesn't control you anymore. It doesn't have the same effects that it had previously. So that's something I will probably till the day I die remember, that exact moment when I was able to say, no, I'm going to stay right here. Like, no matter what happens, right here is where I need to stay. And ever since, it feels like it just gets lighter and lighter. Like, the more that comes up, I'm able to say, no, it's okay. I got it. I'm cool. Like, I own myself. I know how to take care of me, and I'm not controlled by that story anymore. I think that was only probably in the last 3 or 4 years that I was able to really get comfortable with sitting in those places that are really difficult. And for me, that's where I noticed that peace kind of shows up. It's like, there's some level of like surrendering, or that peacefulness that, like, I'll be okay. Even if I feel like I want to run and hide and make whatever happens stop, I can just own it and sit with it. It can be pretty powerful.
There was a wonderful moment, Jennifer, when you were talking, where I could feel and I could see like the level of ownership that like kind of exuding through you. As you're saying this, it reminds me of this tool that I once heard of, that was called like 3 seconds of courage. It's like, if you can be with something and make a decision in the 3-second span, like that's all the courage that's necessary. And when you talk about like the thought was like, it was like a fleeting thought. It been with you in different ways. But like, you're like, it was a fleeting thought. And in what part of what I'm hearing was like, in that bit, you chose to respond to it differently rather
Yeah.
than, leaving, rather than go in this and escaping in some sense of the word. You chose to sit and be with it.
Yep. Absolutely. And there's something really empowering about that, where it was like, okay, I got through that. Um, in a lot of ways, I feel like I tell my therapist all the time, I'm like, I feel like I can get through almost anything. Like if you can sit through those really uncomfortable moments where every ounce of your body is telling you to run or telling you to escape or to do whatever, like if you can really sit with that, I feel like, you can sit with almost anything, because you have that power. And when you find it, you can really use it.
It's interesting because as you say this, I'm smiling over here because um, you talk about the power of like being able to sit with the discomfort, and be able to both recognize it, own it, sit with it, be with it. I had it brought up a memory of a leadership conference that I was at, a leadership intensive. It was actually a coaching intensive, but for me, I keep going back there because I'm like, it calls out my leadership in just the most powerful ways. And I remember talking to someone as we were sitting in the room, and she said to me, she's like, this is a really interesting space. And I said, what, why is that? She said, I've never been in a room where people are actively seeking to be triggered.
Mm.
I've never been in a room where people are actively seeking to be triggered. And when she said that, that like something just really like came into place for me, where it's like, oh yeah, the reason why this feels like a leadership journey for me is because I like they find the areas they find the areas of discomfort. No, it's not that they find it, but the space for discomfort to be able to be there, and you're encouraged to sit in it, rather than to sit in it for yourself, but also not be saved by anyone else, quote unquote, saved or tried to be fixed. One of the things I love in those spaces is that like tears come, but they're like, when people try to bring out tissues and stuff, they're like, please let that person have their experience. If they come to you later on and ask for tissues or they request it, that's different. But like, allow them to have the experience that they're having.
Yeah. And how
And
often are we, maybe uncomfortable with that discomfort? And how often do we, proactively hand people the tissue when they haven't asked for that, right? I mean, there is a lot of power even just sitting with someone else through that experience, right? And I find, one of the things I talk about a lot is finding little moments. Discomfort will always find you, always, every single day. We all have triggers. Look for find small triggers that you have, right? I always say, like in a traffic jam, or you're at line in the supermarket and someone cuts in front of you, or somebody's maybe attacks you on social media. Look for those little tiny moments and practice saying, okay, I notice what's happening. I see the discomfort coming up for me. I want to react. Like, how do we in that moment break that cycle? But you're right. I think a lot of us, not only are we trying to avoid our own discomfort, we're trying to avoid the discomfort we feel with others as well. And there's a lot of power in that, just being able to stay right there, just be present with it. And I think we do that actually a lot in our society, inadvertently maybe, but trying to make people feel better. What we're really doing is invalidating their experience and saying that I'm uncomfortable, and whatever you need is not as important as what I need to feel comfortable in this moment. I think a lot of people struggle with that. And that's why I'm always advocating for practicing when it doesn't matter. Like the things that make you uncomfortable, practice developing that level of comfort of just sitting with it.
we're in such alignment when you say that. Like there's a few different things that come up when you bring that up. One of them is I recognize your commitment to like the everyday aspect of self leadership, the everyday aspect of practice. Like it's really wonderful because we're talking about things. Let's like, I can put this in a different context, right? The context here of um the social injustice, the context of, do I speak up in my office when I feel like I've been, yeah, do I speak up in my office, regardless of the context? How will I be seen if I walk through life with more of my beliefs up front, or really in the self? Like, if I own myself to the extent that I actually showed up and everyone actually got a chance to see me, like, how would I be with that? And I think a lot of times, like, the conversation goes in such a way where we're talking about the bigger moments of our lives, the areas where we made a dramatic change, a dramatic shift, like, before here, there was life was one way, and afterwards it was another. We don't often talk about, like, the everyday, almost mundane, like, opportunities to strengthen the muscles along the way.
Yeah. You don't just get to show up and be like, whoa, I've mastered self-leadership. That's like saying, LeBron James or Michael Jordan have never, or Steph Curry, don't practice every day, hours a day, to master that skill. If you want to show up that way, when you're around others, start showing up that way for yourself when you're alone. And like I said, discomfort will always find you. I don't care who you are. It is like seeking you out, almost testing you. It's like, are you sure? Like, you're good with this? Like, are you sure? Like, practice. I mean, I'm at least 5-10 times a day. I have moments where I'm like, okay, like, either I handled that really well or I didn't. And just notice, like, how am I showing up? And the more you practice that, I find our capacity to be able to hold that space of discomfort increases. And we're not so readily kind of wanting to rotate into, let me solve that problem, or let me make things better, or because that is all about you. And that is all about your own capacity to handle discomfort. When we're truly of service to people, we are able to hold that space, and it doesn't become about making things better. It comes about giving that person what they need in that moment, regardless of maybe your comfort level. So practice with it. And like I said, I mean, at least for me, there's at least 5, 10, 20 times a day where I can practice and go, okay, I see how I want to react. What can I do differently now? How can I sit with this?
I ask you, Jennifer, what's been like, if there was one time or one experience that, how do I say this? What are some of the benefits that you've seen from this? I just want to know from, like, your own personal experience here. Like, okay, we do this. We've given space. We've chosen to be more in discomfort. We found an everyday moment where it's like, someone, like, we said that thing to the pizza delivery person that we would have normally just, like, not noticed, or we at least observed our response afterwards and took note of it. What is how are some of the benefits that you see either transpiring either internally or externally for you as you stepped into more discomfort? Then we'll go in a different direction afterwards. I'm curious.
Sure. But I feel like it's building better relationships with people, whether it's professionally or personally. When I always say, when you understand your own trauma, you understand your own discomfort and triggers, you can start seeing that in others as well. So let's say you do a lot of personal development, but that doesn't mean everyone else is. But how can you relate to them, and how can you extend all of those benefits that you've gained to others? So I think a lot of that happens with that, holding that discomfort. But so relationships, definitely key, but also going back to that peacefulness, that idea that I know I will be okay no matter what happens. Like, even if I lose my cool, right? There are times, I mean, trust me, I'm not perfect, where I'm out in the world and I'm like, that is a trigger, and I totally went off. And instead of, like, before, my narrative would have been like, oh, Jen, like, you're awful, you're terrible. Like, how can you do that? You're an imposter. You talk about mindfulness and yet you just lost your cool. It's less about that narrative and more now about, okay, I see what happened. That was uncomfortable for me. What are some things that I could do differently next time? So it becomes more of like a curiosity practice. So I think it helps when you're in that discomfort to be more curious, because if you can start peeling back the layers and start digging into, like, maybe what came up for you, you can have those insights so that the next time something similar happens, you can respond differently. I think the disconnect becomes when we're not aware of, first of all, how we want to show up. I mean, what do we own? What matters to us? What impact do we want to have on the world? We know that, then we can understand, okay, how am I showing up in that space? Am I aligned to that? Where is it showing up? Where isn't it? Then when it's not showing up, say, okay, what can I start maybe doing differently? What fear might be coming up because of that? What, old story that I have. I mean, there's so many layers that you can go with that. Not everybody wants to do really deep work, and that's fine. But I think it's about just noticing more often. And again, at the bottom, like the crux of everything for me is about that peace. It's about no matter what's going on around me, no matter how much stress, chaos, like, can I be peaceful? Like, can I be okay? No matter what's happening. That to me, at least for me, is the goal in life, is like, how can I be peaceful? Because I can't control everything going on out here. I can only control what's going on in here. So that would, I think, just better relationships, better leadership, better discernment, like being able to make better decisions that again are aligned with your values. And then just being better at just being more peaceful and having different impacts on people.
I really appreciate you, Jennifer. Like, the element here, one of the things that I'm appreciating is that for me, it feels like you've up leveled peace in a different way, right? So we talked a little bit about like kind of almost like things maturing over time. And I think that, I had said earlier, I'm here to serve you rather than please you, right? That may not, that may bring in levels of like areas of conflict or areas of contention, and that's actually what I'm here. I'm here to like provoke thinking, and the way that you described how you can be with peace, how you can be in both discomfort, like peace does not need to live outside of discomfort. And actually like they can come hand in hand. I think a lot of times it can feel, or at least the conventional logic is that, or like the conventional experience is that like, oh, well, like something must be going off. There's conflict here. There's confrontation that's taking place. Peace doesn't exist. I just want peace. And we avoid, we escape, we do other things in there. And instead it feels to me that like, as I'm hearing this, I think oftentimes in terms of like a competency or like a skill set that people have. I'm like, oh, one of her unique strengths is like peacemaking. And at the level that you play it, it's like you can stay in discomfort, and it's not just because you've had some special experience, but it's like you're also finding like these everyday moments to keep doing it, a couple different reps of being more with the discomfort, noticing it when it's there. And I love how you said like discomfort's going to find you. It is, you don't have to create anything here. Nope. It's one of those things. It's fun. It's fun having an organization called Outliers Edge, because it's full of paradoxes. It's like honestly, to tell you the truth, you probably don't know what the real limit or edge is. I'm not sure if we actually have one. We call it the edge, and yet it may not even exist, right? And the same way, it's like, oh, well, if you're looking for more peace, we'll be better with discomfort. What? Like that is not necessarily the path that people would think to go down. And yet there's a lot in there for them.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with all of that. And that's part of the integration that we were talking about also yesterday on my podcast. Was I firmly believe, like, when I see those articles that say we need to abolish the imposter, we need to get rid of the judge, or whatever, lingo people are using, I don't look at it that way. I look at it like, okay, we all have these different parts of us. I think all have benefits. I honestly believe that like the imposter has a benefit. When does the imposter maybe take up too much space, then causes us discomfort, right? And then that discomfort leads to irrational thoughts, decisions that aren't aligned, right? Like you can start seeing kind of the process and the flow of that when you can integrate all of it. When I can say, imposter, you are welcome here. We are all here together. This is one whole part. This is one whole Jen. It includes the imposter, judge, whatever else. Like, it is all there. Now I have the ability to discern what skills I want to pull out of, because I believe the imposter does have skills. It might have, discernment skills that can help me discern, is this aligned to my values or not? There's not all bad. So I think it's about taking all of it and finding ways to integrate it in what feels right to you and what your values are and what you want to own in your life, and making it all like this beautiful, like symphony of, parts of yourself that are in alignment and can work really well together. That's been my goal in helping to cultivate that peace, because like I said, discomfort is always there waiting for you to meet it. And when we are in that aligned state, we can, I think, meet it more wholly than we can if, again, we're fragmented and thinking, oh, these parts of me I just have to get rid of, or I need to squash down, or I need to silence it. No, bring them all to the table. And that's where that self leadership comes in, where your highest self can step in and say, I I know what to do here. You're all welcome. I'm creating that belonging internally, and you're all welcome here. We all have skills. I know how to use the best skills of each of those things. That's been my journey. That's a lot of the work that I do in therapy, is really tapping into all the skills we have, because I honestly believe we are not tapping into more than 50% of the skills that we are capable of, because we are so busy trying to push out the things that make us uncomfortable. I'm saying lean into that discomfort. And in that, you'll find that integration and that peace.
Jennifer, I'm going to choose to bring us to a completion right now in this conversation here, because there's this element here that it just feels really good. I know that I put out for us, and before we came here, I support people with like where their edge is going to next. Like we talk about, I'll spend time just like actually coaching and supporting, and not. I feel we've had a great conversation so far, and I actually want to give more space. Usually, I'm like, I can have a life-changing conversation in 3 minutes. Like it's not about the time overall. But as we're having this conversation, I'm like, oh, I think I want to just give more space to actually just be in support of the discomfort that you're choosing to take on, or the place where you're looking to bring in more peace into your world right now. So are you good with us like allowing us to just take in the space later on to really just be of service, would that work for you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. All right. So let's do that. I feel that you brought things, just this element of being with the discomfort and choosing to be in it. I talk a lot about courage. I talk a lot about showing up as you. We talked earlier about like the costs of all these things. And it's like, are you willing to build up the muscle? And now I'm going to ask anyone that's watching this resource here, like, are you willing to build up the muscle? And it can come from the most like mundane situations. And I love that you pulled that out there, Jennifer. Mm-hmm. It doesn't have to be like, it can show up at any point. It's going to find you, actually. So what I'm hearing is like, do you have your radar on? Is your lens off enough to actually be able to see it when it comes in and lean into the opportunity that's there?
Yeah.
We talked earlier about imposter syndrome, and one of the things that I look for myself now, I'm not gonna lie, like I do look for discomfort. I'm like, if I don't feel uncomfortable, then for me, that's my sign of growth. I think that there's healing journeys. I think that there's growth journeys. And where I'm at with the things that I'm focusing on right now, discomfort is a really big friend of mine, because I'm like, if I don't feel a discomfort, I'm like, oh, I got this already. Clearly I'm already equipped. And so I'm just repeating something that I've already done, which is fine. And it has its merits. But in terms of me, like, let me not kid myself in saying that I've actually gone somewhere deeper, or that I'm actually growing a new skill. Like, I'll feel that in one of the moments of discomfort. And I feel like as long like in the spaces of growth, I look for discomfort, and I would say the imposter syndrome in particular, as like part of my guide forward, like part of my North Star to help me know, like, oh, okay, I'm actually taking on something else that is of importance to me. Something in here, I don't feel this way. I don't get sweaty palms. I don't feel discomfort. I don't feel like the imposter syndrome around things that either don't matter to me, or that I've already kind of like been there, done that. I got this,
I think you made some important point I just want to touch on real quick with the imposter syndrome. Is I often look at it like it's data. Susan David, who is uh, someone who talks about emotional agility and emotional intelligence, says that it's like data. It's like it's telling you something. That imposter showing up is saying something to you. And often what I find for me is it's saying this matters to you, that this is important. And it could be signposting to you that this is your purpose. And there can be fear with that. There can be discomfort. And it's not like, once you find your, aligned to purpose, you're like in this blissful moment. It can be uncomfortable, but just, I think picking those things apart and saying, I can have a reaction to something. And I also know that it's telling me something too. It's not that it needs to go away and I need to forget about it, but might just say, hey, this is something that really matters to you. And that could be a really important piece of data for you in your growth journey, is understanding, hey, I got really nervous about this. Maybe this is something important. I should do more of this. Maybe it's telling me to go in that direction. But that's why I think discernment is such a huge critical piece in all leadership skills. But when you develop that piece, that's what you find, is that ability to discern those things more easily. And we're not reacting in like trauma or fear or maybe ego in some way, where it's wanting you to do something, get rid of something, make a more clear decision. So I like to pull it apart a little bit when I see that come up. And usually what it's telling me is that really matters to you. And that's probably something that's important. So embrace the discomfort.
That sounds fantastic here. Jennifer, if there's one thing that you can just say to kind of close it, to help us complete here in this moment right now, to anyone who might find this resource at any point in their journey, what's the one thing that's coming through with you? It doesn't even need to tie into anything else we've said, but what right now needs to be, do you feel you like to put into this space in order to complete us? And then we'll just share how people can, kind of continue the journey with you if they like.
Yeah, I would just say, pay attention and notice more in your life so that you understand how to live more wholly and more peacefully. And I think, not only for yourself, for kind of the collective and all of us, I think we really need it. And I work with a lot of clients. I'm also a coach as well. And this is the lifeblood of the work that I do, is helping people find that piece and be able to develop the skills and hold the space for that to really come forward and to really, blossom and to really grow. So I think, the more that you can create room in your life for that, you'll start seeing differences. So I appreciate you holding this space for us today. It was a pleasure to get to be able to talk about this important topic.
Absolutely. Well, I'm glad to be able to create this space. If someone wanted to continue the journey with you, what's the best way they can contact you?
So you can find me through my website, coachwithinsight.com. You can also check out my podcasts, intheleadshow.com. And yeah, you can connect with me through either of those websites. Yeah. And
all right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Jennifer. It's been an absolute pleasure here. I'm looking forward to continuing to support where your next edge is in an upcoming conversation. But thank you for bringing all of you to this conversation and owning you and finding ways for us to explore discomfort and peace in ways that hasn't ever been presented to me. So thanks for provoking my thoughts as well.
Yeah, thank you.
Ready to play at your edge? Come join us inside of the Outliers Edge multiverse, where you have the opportunity to come for 14 days and play in the sandbox of your unique leadership style and take everything about you to its next edge. Go to outliersedge.com/OE guest pass in order to receive your 2-week gift.